Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isabel Fletcher, and I am the Acting CEO of Horizon NUA. We are the co-organisers of this Connecting Nature Enterprise Summit, hosted by the City of Poznan. It's my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to this policy dialogue on realising the potential of the nature-based economy. Before I introduce the chair for this session this afternoon, I would just like to draw your attention to one housekeeping matter. We would like to inform you that this session will be recorded, along with any questions and answers submitted to the chat. The recording of the session will be made available after the event through the Connecting Nature website, and comments from the chat will be taken into account in the event proceedings, which will be published afterwards. I'd now like to hand you over to Siobhan McQuaid, your chair for this afternoon's session. Siobhan is the coordinator of the Connecting Nature project, involving 11 European cities and 30 partners from across Europe, as well as urban by nature hubs in Brazil, China, Korea, and the Caucasus. Siobhan is the Associate Director of the Centre for Social Innovation in Trinity College Dublin, and she is the chair of the Working Group on the Nature-Based Economy in EC Task Force 3. She is also the co-editor with Professor Mary Lee Rhodes of the draft white paper on the nature-based economy, which provides the context for discussions in this policy dialogue this afternoon. So Siobhan, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel, and a very warm welcome to everyone to this policy dialogue. Before I introduce our distinguished panel of guests this afternoon, I would like to maybe just start by providing you with a brief context to the discussions about the nature-based economy. So over the last 6 months, I have had the pleasure of working with a group of experts from 12 Horizon 2020 projects and from the Life Project Artisan. Together, we have produced a draft white paper entitled From Nature-Based Solutions to the Nature-Based Economy. This draft white paper is being launched this afternoon for consultation, and we invite you to provide your feedback on the concept of a nature-based economy, but in particular on the recommendations to make it happen. These recommendations are directed towards policymakers at the global level, at the EU level, and very importantly, at national and local government level. Our panel here this afternoon has been carefully constructed to represent each of these levels of policymaker. And we will be asking each of them to share their perspective on the nature-based economy and to tell us what, if any, actions they are planning to realise this. But first, maybe I'll start by asking, what do we mean by the nature-based economy? So we've all heard about the circular economy, the bioeconomy, and most recently in the Dasgupta review, we've heard about the economics of biodiversity. So you might very well ask, do we need a new term? Well, we would argue that you do, because we think that nature needs to be explicitly recognised and valued in our economic approach, valued as both an input and as an output. In this paper, we identify nature-based solutions as a supercharger of the nature-based economy. And we identify 11 economic categories where private sector actors are already driving market development. So in this paper, we call for increased investment in these nature-based market sectors to stimulate new innovation, to build skills, capacities, and quality standards, to open up new markets, and most importantly, probably, to create jobs and enterprises that work in harmony with nature. Nature-based enterprises offer our young people alternative career paths, rewarding and highly skilled career paths, using science and technology to combat climate change and biodiversity loss. We support the UN call for a tripling of investment in nature-based solutions by 2030 and a quadrupling of investment by 2050. But We want to make sure that this investment is leveraged to really drive forward the nature-based economy, creating innovation, jobs, and enterprise. So that's just a short overview. Now let me introduce you to our panel of policymakers who are going to introduce and provide their perspective on this important topic. Kicking off the session here today, we have a video message from Leonora Gewessler, who's the Austrian Federal Minister for Climate Protection, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation and Technology. And she is joined by Susanne Formanek of Grünstadtgrau, the National Centre of Excellence for Green Buildings in Austria. Then we will be joined by two policymakers representing cities. So we're delighted to welcome from our host city here in Poznan, Jacek Jaśkowiak, the Mayor of Poznan, and Rafał Trzaskowski, the Mayor of Warsaw, and the Committee of the Regions Rapporteur on the EU Climate Pact. Moving to national level then, we welcome Aurélie Tailleur from ADEME, the French Environment Agency. And then on the international stage, we are delighted that Alice Charles, the city lead in the World Economic Forum, can join us, alongside Oliver Hillel from the Secretariat of the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity administered by the UN Environment Programme. But of course, our panel would not be complete without a representative of the business community. Antonia Lorenzo, the CEO of Bioazul, is representing nature-based enterprises here this afternoon. Bioazul is an industry leader in pioneering nature-based solutions for water management, and Antonia is also the ambassador of the water management community on the Connecting Nature enterprise platform and an ambassador for Water Europe. Finally, and you might think if we could squeeze somebody else in, but we will, very importantly, the last word of the afternoon will be given to the European Commission. And we're delighted to have the support of Philippe Tulkans, who's the acting head of unit for climate and planetary boundaries in DG Research and Innovation. And Philippe will be delivering the closing statement here this afternoon. So as you can see, we have a packed panel for you this afternoon. So I suggest we kick off now with an introductory message from the Minister Leonora Gewessler and Susanne Formanek from Austria.
Die Pandemie macht uns allen bewusst, wie essentiell Natur- und Erholungsräume für unser Wohlbefinden sind, vor allem in der Stadt. Mit Forschung und Innovation werden zukunftsweisende Entwicklungen und integrierte Konzepte für eine smarte, resiliente Stadtentwicklung und die Realisierung von grünen Infrastrukturmaßnahmen vorangetrieben. Das BMK unterstützt im Rahmen des Forschungsprogramms Stadt der Zukunft die Entwicklung von innovativen Stadtbegrünungstechnologien, um die Vorteile und Möglichkeiten von Bauwerksbegrünungen sichtbarer zu machen. Über 20 Forschungsinstitutionen sind zum Thema urbane grüne Infrastruktur in Österreich aktiv. Bislang konnten im Rahmen des Programms 23 Forschungsprojekte im Bereich der Bauwerks- und Stadtbegrünung mit knapp 7 Millionen Euro gefördert werden. 2017 initiierten wir das im Rahmen von Stadt der Zukunft geförderte Innovationslabor Grünstadtgrau, um Kooperation und Synergien im Forschungsbereich Grüne Stadt zu forcieren und die Umsetzung von zukunftsweisenden Projekten zu unterstützen. Ziel ist es, neue Themen und Konzepte für die grüne Stadt zu identifizieren und in Co-Creation-Prozessen gemeinsam mit Bürgerinnen und Bürgern, Verwaltung und Politik weiterzuentwickeln. Das Innovationslabor ist ein sehr gutes Beispiel, wie richtungsweisende FDI zu neuen, breit anzuwendenden Lösungen führen kann.
We are delighted to contribute to the Connecting Nature Enterprise Summit. If every newly constructed building is fitted with a green roof, we would generate 33,000 new green jobs in Austria. But green infrastructure is only one sector of the nature-based economy. It is a sector which has been identified with much potential for innovation and job creation in Austria. The main challenges we have seen in growing this sector have been barriers around long-term maintenance. There is a lack of understanding that maintenance is essential and that the costs of maintenance need to be budgeted for. Highly quality execution of green infrastructure is very important. For this reason, we have developed standards in Austria, which include maintenance concepts and provide options for effective fire protection. Lack of knowledge or thinking that there is no need of knowledge. We developed a qualification program in which we compare the overall costs to the respective benefits and advantages. We do have barriers in planning, for instance, providing enough space for plants, and we are faced with building-specific hurdles, such as statics or roof design. Therefore, we are raising awareness by demonstrating best practice projects. Public prejudice, such as invasions of insects, permanent sealing or escalating costs for maintenance. And finally, the complexity in construction. The interfaces, for instance, to building information modeling. The support at the national level from the Ministry of Climate Change with the program City of Tomorrow has been a significant enabler for us. Our Innovation Lab is an instrument of the Ministry. We are funded by the Ministry and we are owned by the Association of Green Roofs and Green Walls in Austria. Without this help, we would have not been able to stimulate the growth and the green infrastructure sector. We are seeing the return on this investment in terms of jobs and innovation today. As part of this policy dialogue, we call on policymakers at international, national and city level to invest now in seed funding this sector to leave our children livable cities.
Der auflebende Trend zur Bauwerksbegrünung wird durch die Klimakrise wieder zur notwendigen Maßnahme, um Städte hinsichtlich der zu erwartenden Temperaturanstiege und Extremwetterereignisse klimaneutral und lebenswert zu gestalten. Das Potenzial von Bauwerksbegrünungen ist vielversprechend. Gründächer schaffen attraktiven Lebensraum für Flora und Fauna und fördern somit auch die wertvolle Biodiversität. Aktuell wird jedes 10. Flachdach als Gründach ausgeführt. Pro 8000 Quadratmeter Gründachfläche entstehen 10 neue Arbeitsplätze. Würde jedes 2. Gründach im Neubau bis 2030 begrünt ausgeführt, ergäbe das mehr als 33.000 neue Arbeitsplätze. Mit gezielten Maßnahmen können Gesundheits-, Wirtschafts-, Energie- und umweltpolitische Ziele vereint werden und so zu einem dauerhaft wirksamen Konjunkturmotor führen. Eine intensive Kooperation zwischen Politik, Forschung, Energie-, Bau- und Begrünungsbranche ist notwendig, um Klimaschutz fair für alle zugänglich zu machen.
Wow. That was great, wasn't it? A fabulous, I think, introduction, I suppose, to the topic here today. And we'd like to thank Minister Gewessler and Susanna for this message of support and for highlighting, I suppose, both the challenges and the potential returns from this sector. 33,000 new jobs, that sounds like a tremendous potential. It's impressive, but as Susanna also points out, that's only in one sector of the economy, because green buildings are not the nature-based economy. They're one sector, an important sector, quite a mature sector, but there are other economic sectors which have much potential for the future. So let's get started maybe with some of our panel this afternoon, and let's start and go first of all maybe to our host city of Poznan. Could I ask the mayor, Mayor Jacek Juszkowiak, if you could perhaps tell us a little bit about how Poznan sees the connection between nature and the economy.
Yeah, no, we see the direct connection. For example, if you see now the growth of e-commerce in the last year, it is from 8% to 12%. And it is the challenge for us and also the opportunity to agree some things with such companies like UPS, like DHL, or with companies like eBay. In Poland, it is Allegro, or InPost. It means from one side we see some city malls will collapse, and so then it is the problem of people who are working there. On the other side, it is the growth of e-commerce, and we have more trucks. We have more vans. We have the problem of the last mile delivery. And so it is also for us a very interesting opportunity, because if we speak together, if we now solve some problems, then we had profits in the future, because it is for me obvious. In maybe 3-4 years, it will grow till maybe 20%, maybe till 30%. It is also a big problem with waste management, because if they deliver such packages, then we have also the problem of package waste. And it is, in my opinion, a very interesting opportunity to see for some solutions together with companies which are involved in such matter. Of course, the problem itself, it is the number of cars. In Poznań, we have 400,000 cars, and it is also connected to the pollution. If we invest in public transport, if we invest in bicycle paths, if we change some mentality, then it is also the opportunity to have less pollution from transport, to have also less noise, because the noise, it is also the very big problem for everybody who is living in the city. And of course, the very big opportunity is the heating system. From one side, we can speak with such very big companies which are delivering or heating the almost all the whole city, and they are delivering the hot water in the pipes. And in our case, in Poznań, we agreed that they change 2 blocks of 3 where are using the coal, and then they changed into the gas. So, in my opinion, the opportunity, if we speak about the nature, about the companies, it is not only the matter which is so obvious. I mean, such stops for trams and such small architecture, also the things we know. Also, we have to see also the changes in the city, the changes like e-commerce, the challenges like mobility, transport, and then we have from one side a lot of working places. On the other hand, we have also the opportunity to reduce CO2. We can do a lot for the nature.
Thank you, Mayor Jaśkowiak. Indeed, you have touched on a lot there, from circular economy principles through to heating and transport. And indeed, you've really highlighted the importance of integrating nature across all those domains. If I could perhaps, we'll stay in Poland for the moment, but move a little bit further east to Warsaw. Could I ask you, Mayor Trzaskowski, how do you see the potential of nature to stimulate jobs and enterprises in Warsaw? And what do you see as the main challenge?
Hi, hello. Good afternoon, everybody, from Warsaw. Of course, we are at the forefront of a revolution, because the whole world and the European Union is undertaking a green revolution, and either we are going to make use of it, or we are going to be relegated to the margins of European economy. So there is absolutely no choice. I mean, we have to participate in that revolution. And of course, we in Warsaw, we are very much convinced that that's the way forward. We want, and I've declared it, to make Warsaw climate neutral by 2050. And of course, with the current energy mix of Poland, which is directed by a very conservative government, which does not take climate change seriously, will be tough. And there are quite a lot of challenges that are before us. But the most important thing is that we need to change the paradigm, that economic growth does not have to mean increased consumption of resources, that we can actually drive our economy by investments which generate economic benefits. And that's, in a nutshell, what a sustainable city should do. And that's, of course, our priority in those difficult times. Now, what are we doing? We are doing quite a lot. Just like Poznan, we are investing in public transportation. We are eliminating all the coal power stoves. We are investing in greenery. We are really stringent when it comes to the building codes so that we have as much green spaces as possible. We are investing in retention, and we are doing everything in order to increase our capacity in that field. And of course, the transformation is going on, and we are making quite a progress, but the most important problem is that it is expensive. And in those difficult times, when on the one hand, our government is now at war with local governments and is limiting our budgets and our prerogatives, on the other hand, there are problems with the epidemic, because every budget in every city, every European city that I know is pretty strained. Then, of course, there is a possibility of the EU funding that we are all fighting for. I'm a rapporteur in the Committee of the Regions on a Green Pact. We are a member of C40 organization, which is actually the organization for the most ambitious cities when it comes to green investment and green transformation. So we are doing quite a lot of exchanges of information, quite a lot of benchmarking. But the important thing is obviously think about funding, because without investment, we are not going to be able to actually complete the green revolution that is before us. Now, the nature-based economy that we are striving at achieving, of course, combines human, environmental, and climate goals and benefits with sustainable development. And supporting and scaling the NBE concept is a major step forward as we strive to counter the growing climate and economic crisis. And I think that at the end of the day, this is a great opportunity for cities such as Warsaw, because we can conserve energy, we can actually fight climate change, we can improve the quality of air, and we can come up with solutions that are going to benefit everyone and that are not going to simply use the resources without making strives towards sustainability, but that are going to actually meet all of those goals at the same time. But yes, if we talk about the greatest challenge of all, that's the question of financing. And thanks God, there is a recovery package by the European Union, and hopefully the money will be distributed with the full participation of regional and local authorities, so that the criteria are not political, but that we actually invest the money where they're needed most.
Great. Thank you so much for those words and that very strong message that we need more investment in this area. And it's a message that we'll come back to time and time again, because as we said at the beginning, the UN have called for a tripling of investment in nature. Linked, it's not something separate from the recovery package, it's something that should be an integral part of it. So perhaps now we can move from Poland and we'll maybe go over to France, and we'll talk to ADEME, the French Environment Agency, which are strongly supporting the LIFE project Artisan, which is looking at the potential of nature-based solutions for adaptation, for climate change adaptation at all levels, city level, regional level and national level. So Aurélie, could I perhaps ask you to tell us a little bit about where you see the role of the private sector in realising nature-based solutions, and perhaps some of the challenges that you see in kind of realising the potential of this area?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Just a few words about the context, about why in ADEME we are working on NBS. In France, different national strategies aim to support the NBS implementation. It is in particular the case of the National Plan for Adaptation to Climate Change, and also the French National Strategy for Biodiversity. And we know that NBS can contribute efficiently to the adaptation of different sectors to different climate change impacts. For this purpose, Artisan, led by the French Biodiversity Office, is creating a framework for NBS implementation by improving scientific and technical knowledge about them, then by developing and disseminating relevant tools for project leaders, for instance, for the design, the sizing, the implementation, and evaluation of ecosystem performance. In this aim, the project has a budget of 16.7 million euros and involved in 40 actions during 8 years, 28 partners, including several local authorities, technical research, and education institutes. In the framework of the project Artisan, ADEM lead a specific action aiming to foster the private sector supply of NBS for adaptation. We are now finalizing a preliminary study to understand which the NBS supply is and currently is, and which actors are involved. We currently identify different economic benefits of NBS implementation. First, biodiversity, climate change adaptation, and economy are too often treated in silo, while we need to bring them together. Both environments and ecosystem services, but also economy, will be directly impacted by climate change. And the challenge is to use NBS to contribute to the climate change risk reduction for different sectors, but also to maintain ecosystem services which contribute to our economy. Moreover, we observe that different private actors are already positioning on this market, showing a real potential of growth and job creation. During this preliminary study, we observed a very wide diversity of projects concerning different environments and targeting different climate change impacts. We observed also that a very wide diversity of actors are already involved in this project at different steps. For the design, the implementation, but also the maintenance. We also observed that in France, we have already different legal and financing mechanisms that are supporting the NBS implementation, but they are not sufficient. So we also identify different barriers, which are also very well identified in the draft white paper. In particular, we identified the need first to raise awareness of potential private and public customers about the NBS benefits. We also identified the need to enhance networking of different stakeholders because NBS projects are quite complex and require different skills, and we need to connect this. And also, we identify the need to enhance competencies, in particular to better integrate climate change adaptation issues into NBS projects. We observe that a lot of projects have co-benefits in terms of climate change adaptation, but maybe not sufficient to face these challenges because we notice that they don't take always in consideration the future climate and how it will impact the water resources and the performance of NBS. And also, not always include updating knowledge and learning processes that could help to improve performance of NBS. So the next step for ADEM will be now to build a strategy to overcome these barriers and to enhance NBS supply.
Thank you, Aurélie. So if I'm hearing correctly, you've identified a lot of potential, but also a lot of challenges. In particular, you mentioned the complexity there of NBS and all of the different actors involved, but you mentioned also important knowledge gaps, which is hopefully something that you will address in your future programs. But at the same time, maybe I could move to the international stage at this stage and bring in Oliver Hillel, because I know, Oliver, that you're particularly interested in nature-based solutions and addressing these knowledge gaps as really, you see this very much as the potential of this area as an alternative future for the next generation. So perhaps I maybe could ask you to give us an outline of what you see as the opportunities for young entrepreneurs working with nature and biodiversity arising out of the negotiations in the CBD of a 10-year.
Thank you very much.
To you, Oliver.
I think it's very timely discussion because in the Convention on Biological Diversity, 96 national governments are already discussing and have been discussing a plan of action for the engagement of cities and subnational authorities at all levels in the work of the UN of national government. So we've had a plan of action, and it looks like we're going to have another plan of action. So I do provoke the colleagues on climate and land management to have a similar instrument that actually connects all levels of governance. That allows you to do what is needed here, which is to start accelerating the green economy, the nature restorative economy. It's not obvious, I want to mention that, as the leader of the Nature for Finance or Finance for Nature initiative, which is bringing a lot of multilateral development banks together, said, they who do climate do not necessarily do nature. Integrating nature is a very specific process, which we in the Convention are finding out saves usually 10 times the amount of investment it would take to treat water through nature. So it makes a lot of sense. And we can see now that many countries, such as the UK, after they've read the so-called Dasgupta report, which again points very clearly to the benefits of nature. The UK has said, for instance, that not a cent of a pound of international overseas development assistance will now be spent without taking care that it is nature restorative. So this is the kind of vision that we see. How does that generate jobs at the local level or for young people? I think there are two responses. At the subnational level, we have to look at territory. We have to look at the land and seascape approach. We have to look at productive land, conservation land, and urban land so that they become assets for biodiversity. And we have to put innovation to work to disrupt the traditional supply chains and find and insert those nature-based solutions like we did with the vaccine for COVID. And I think most importantly, at the level of cities, definitely look at this. We're spending in general 20 or 30 times more money today destroying nature than we are spending on protecting it. So what we obviously need to do now is to change the way we invest, we consume, we plan, so that nature becomes a part of that restoration along with climate resilience. And the way to do that is not just by protecting, it is by accelerating the green economy. We have to understand that the big billionaires of the future need to be those businesses today that are the most innovative and transformative in integrating nature-based solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Some powerful messages there. And just the first one in terms of nature being a very, probably a more efficient way of addressing climate change. I think that's a very powerful message. And I think also the EU taxonomy for sustainable activities will help to direct investment towards those kind of activities. So there are important steps, I think, being made in that direction. But absolutely, I fully concur with your message that it's important that we support those entrepreneurs of the future to build their businesses with nature at the core in a very harmonious way. And what's interesting in the discussions in the preparation for this session, we identified that a lot of actually the governments and cities and local authorities are very much at the forefront of this development. And it's quite interesting to see their role and how that has evolved. Perhaps I could bring in Alice Charles at the moment as the city lead in the World Economic Forum. Alice, could I ask you perhaps to share your perspective on the nature-based economy and the argument that we need a radical shift away from current economic approaches towards this new perspective where nature is valued, and as Oliver has said, it's really the driver of these kind of businesses of the future?
First of all, Siobhan, thank you for having me, and hello to everyone who's joining us today. I have to say, from my perspective, it was a pleasure to hear the ambition of both the ministers and mayors in Austria, Poland and France in terms of what they're doing to create a nature positive future. I just want to put your question into context in the first instance. So back in 2016, the UN had a major conference which was focused on housing and sustainable urban development. And there they adopted something called the New Urban Agenda, which is basically focusing on how we could realize SDG 11 on cities, so how we could create sustainable development in our cities. And I think one of the things that was interesting in relation to the New Urban Agenda, when we look at nature, for example, was that for the first time there was a huge recognition that nature, for example, was not just aesthetically pleasing in terms of our landscapes, but actually was a huge driver of socioeconomic development in our cities and urban centres around the world. And of course, you know, that is true in terms of the uplift value that it creates for property. It of course facilitates business and public and private investment. It provides livelihood opportunities, and it creates greater inclusion. So and evidence, for example, in the United States found that where you have green space somewhere between 80 and 100 meters from a house, then the price goes up by 7%, for example. And also similarly in the United States, they found that where you have sort of 9 to 12%, sorry, 9 to 10% greater purchases in retail facilities where you have nature. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. And from our perspective at the World Economic Forum, we released a major paper, The Future of Nature and Business Report, last year, where we recognize that particularly creating a nature positive pathway in the infrastructure and built environment could create 3 trillion in business opportunities and create 117 million jobs by 2030. So let's look at some of the examples of where cities are already doing that. So Oliver mentioned, for example, nature-based solutions. So how are cities embracing nature-based solutions? So many of us remember hearing about the city of Cape Town, for example, in 2017, 2018, facing one of the worst droughts that it ever faced. And of course, to ensure that that situation didn't happen again, the city started to look at what they should do. Many were saying, build additional dams, you know, very heavy infrastructure developments. But actually what they did in the city of Cape Town was focusing on restoring the city's watersheds. And what they found is that that has generated an additional annual water gain of 50 billion litres per year. And that's the equivalent to 18% of the city's water needs, for example. So that they were able to do at a fraction of the cost of what it would have taken to build heavy infrastructure. And of course, there are many other cities that have done likewise. So, you know, the city of Melbourne, which really started the urban forestry movement a number of years ago, had a situation where its urban forestry was dying, temperatures were increasing, flooding was increasing, and they had a major strategy to get people to adopt a tree through a social network, so to plant trees, look after their trees, and they've been able to decrease the temperature, they've been able to provide greater soakage, so preventing flooding. So again, with a big focus on nature, they've been able to solve many problems, their heat impact, but also their flooding impact. And similarly, the city of Buenos Aires has a huge focus in terms of restoring one of the lakes, for example, to reduce overall flooding in the city. So we see that nature-based solutions can be availed of in the provision of infrastructure. I think the other thing is that nature can directly generate an income. And whether that's the city of Fukuoka in Japan that's thinking about, okay, as cities and businesses try to get to net zero carbon, part of that will be offsetting. So is there value in terms of green spaces if they're able to provide some of that additional forestry, for example, and charge for that? So, you know, is there a revenue that can be generated from that? But if I think of another example, the city of Surabaya in Indonesia, there the mayor adopted a program to protect its mangroves, and it was called One Soul, One Tree. And that was a campaign that was sponsored to basically protect 5,000 trees within the city. And what they did there was they first of all, were able to guide the people who owned those trees and how to better take care of those trees and generate an income from those trees. For example, they were able to harvest syrup. So it ultimately created employment and income for many people who lived in an impoverished city. But I also want to mention something that I mentioned earlier. I mentioned the uplift in value associated with areas where you provide green space. And, you know, for example, if you think about the High Line project in New York, or you think about Prospect Park in New York, what resulted was real estate values increasing significantly as green space was provided. And if we take the example of Prospect Park, what happened, for example, was invariably some of the poorer residents were pushed out. There was a greater degree of gentrification. So the question is, should cities be thinking about land value capture in areas surrounding where they provide additional green space, so that you protect the existing community, but also you capture any increase in value if somebody wants to sell their existing residence. And we've had similar situations arise, not just in New York, but for example, in Mumbai, where they tried to protect mangroves. Again, people were drove out of that neighborhood. It was formerly a settlement for slum residents, but with the protection of the mangroves, it actually resulted in property prices increasing and everyone wanted to live there. Another thing that's being thought about is in terms of planning gains. So how can we get to a nature positive future? So for example, what London is thinking about right now is thinking about how do they demand not just that if a developer is developing a development that you provide the same nature that was there before, but actually you provide 10% over and above. And of course that can be in the form of green roofs, green walls, biophilia, green campuses surrounding developments. But I think it's an interesting way to bring nature back to the city. So finally, just to say in relation to cities, I think the future is very much net zero, nature positive and inclusive, and there's a real opportunity to think about how cities can leverage some of the COVID-19 recovery packages that are out there to create an opportunity to create nature positive cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. And you know what, it's inspiring to hear so many examples from around the world of really how different cities and the leaders of those cities are really using nature and are not so much using nature, but really working in harmony with nature to bring benefits, not just for addressing climate change issues, but to bring benefits for our society and also for the economy. And I'm glad you touched on the topic of gentrification, because of course one of the principles of the IUCN global standard for NBS is really co-production of these kind of nature-based solutions with communities to ensure that they're very much involved in that transition. And you mentioned infrastructure and the potential for nature-based solutions to be integrated into infrastructure developments, which a nice segue perhaps into our final speaker in this session, or in this section of the dialogue, which is Antonia Lorenzo, the CEO of BioAzul. So Antonia is representing the business community here. So you've heard all of these speakers, Antonia, from the policy side in cities, at national level, at international level, talking about the potential of nature to create jobs and to create employment. From your perspective as a business working in this area, what do you see as the potential, but also the challenges, and what kind of actions would you ask or see as a priority to ask our policymakers really to start acting on?
Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. It's a pleasure. And I will try to answer. I mean, your question, it was quite inspiring what the others were saying. But I would like to talk about 3 points that I consider very relevant from the Naturebased enterprises perspective. The first is regarding this silo thinking at the municipal level, which in principle could be considered a barrier, but I also see it as an opportunity for nature-based enterprises and for nature-based solution project implementation. In general, what I see is that the projects currently being demanded by the city are far from the conventional ones of the past. So contemporary urban planning has to respond not only to the standard problems and challenges, but also to other such as limited natural resources, climate change effect, climate neutrality. And in addition, the projects that will strong impact at the city level must be intersectorial, multi-actor and multidisciplinary ones. It was already mentioned by some of the previous speakers. So this is the case of nature-based solution projects in which several actors are involved, and also several municipality departments, let's say, skills, understanding, commitments, and the channels and tools for making ready this way of cooperation are not always implemented in the city council. And also sometimes if they are implemented, they are not working as smoothly as desired. So why, this is the first thing I would like to say, why don't we take this as an opportunity to launch this new way of working in a proactive and interconnected manner in between private sector and public sector. We, the Naturebased Enterprises, Biothul as a company delivering nature-based solution on water management, but also those belonging to our community in the platform are ready to guide and work hand by hand with the municipalities in this transition, in this revolution, as it was also mentioned before. So we are ready and looking forward to do so. Another point which I also consider very relevant is public procurement. Because this is, from my understanding, a powerful driver for nature-based solution market stimulation. I mean, only in 2017, the public purchase of goods and services in Europe was estimated to be 2-3 trillion. I mean, it's difficult for me even to pronounce it. It's 40% of the gross domestic product. So nature-based enterprises, we are ready to deliver nature-based solutions, are ready to further invest in innovation, develop improved solutions to cope with these specific challenges cities are facing. And we also believe that nature-based solutions, nature-based enterprises have the needed potential to boost these local economies and create business opportunities within this context of climate emergency, health and economic crisis, and the need to transit to the decarbonized economy. So I think there are several types of procurement in which nature-based solution could be framed, such as green procurement, innovative procurement, and the most present one, circular procurement. But in many cases, the public authorities still report some difficulties in using these public procurement types to implement nature-based solutions. And also for us as nature-based enterprises, we report difficulties on finding these opportunities in the public procurement tender. So I think all this together discourage a little bit the investment by the companies and by the investor in nature-based solutions. So we need really that the implementation of nature-based solution projects are included in the public procurement in a clear way to stimulate this investment for the growth of the current and coming nature-based enterprises and for creating jobs and stimulate financing. And the last but not least, I want to mention is about the relevance of nature-based solution and its contribution to the city's circularity challenges. So the implementation of nature-based solutions contribute to the circularity of water, nutrients, energy, circularity of many flows, let's say. We will support the cities to achieve these goals in terms of circular action plan, the Green Deal, and the Sustainable Development Goals. All is interconnected. So we want to support them in implementing these projects that seek to contribute to the closed energy and material loops within all supply chains, and minimizing and in best cases avoiding any negative environmental impacts and waste creation across the whole cycle. So again, the private sector, the nature-based enterprises are ready to deliver this solution to the municipalities and contributes to the circularity. So I see the context is very much in favor of implementing this nature-based solution. We only have to understand each other very well and start working more and more together for the same goal with the same vision.
Thank you, Antonia. And you have brought us right back to the very first message that Minister Gewessler delivered, is the importance of, I suppose, bridging those silos and really working together across different policy areas to make sure that, that I suppose nature is integrated into all actions and all areas. And as pointed out by Alice and Oliver, I think it's a very efficient way of achieving these other climate change objectives. If I could perhaps now, and the other thing I would say is that you have also probably tapped into a number of the kind of of recommendations that are coming out in the white paper, not least those relating to public procurement, which was identified now that there's a lot more interest in nature-based solutions, a lot more demand for it. It appears that there's really a lot of cities are experiencing a challenge in finding skilled suppliers, and a lot of that comes down to these challenges around public procurement. But maybe if we could have a look now at some of, this morning we were running a poll across some of our different community workshops, and we pulled out a number of the recommendations from the white paper, and we asked them to rate which were the most important. So you can see here in terms of which of the following measures to support NBS market development would you rate the most important? And coming up neck and neck, interestingly, is a substantive increase in public sector investment in NBS, because I think we had Raval, the Mayor of Warsaw, was asking for that. Measures to incentivise private sector investment in NBS. And I think, Alice, you maybe have touched on some of those in terms of identifying the opportunities there, and in particular related to real estate and development. Specific measures to support nature-based enterprise development and innovation. Increased awareness and support for good practice in NBS to foster a shift towards a nature-based economy. And then the last one is capacity building and market development of NBEs. So quite a variation there, but I think we could clearly say, I think, that the public-private sector investment maybe is coming out most strongly. I just wonder maybe if I could open this up to the panel and see if anyone would like to comment on that. Is anybody surprised, or is that more or less in line with what you would expect? Very good. I don't know if we have our panel there. I see, Oliver, you're commenting here that public-private partnerships are definitely one of the the highest interest. Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing those results. Let's move on perhaps now to some of the more detailed recommendations from the white paper. And if I could go perhaps now back to our two mayors, and we'll start at city level. And could I ask more specifically, Mayor Trzaskowski, perhaps, how you are going about engaging with the business and community stakeholders in decision-making about nature, because we just saw on the poll there that really engaging the private sector with the public sector is really a kind of a key priority. So are you doing anything in Warsaw to really bring the public and the private sector together in terms of investment in nature?
Yes, I mean, you have to, first of all, you need to increase the awareness, and you have to involve the people. That's one of the most important things, because, the young generation understand that there is a climate catastrophe around the corner, and they are actually pressurizing politicians to do our utmost about it. But there are quite a lot of people who either do not believe in climate warming, or they do not think this is the most important thing, or they do not connect the dots. They do believe that there is a catastrophe around the corner, but for example, when we try to limit the access of cars into the center of the city and prioritize public transportation, they're protesting against it because they do not see the link. So, I mean, what we did, we are doing the awareness campaigns, of course, we're cooperating with the young people, but we've decided to do more. I mean, there is something which is called a citizens panel, where you actually choose a representation of your city's populace, 100 people chosen randomly according to a certain formula. And then I decided to simply give them a voice about climate, especially about energy efficiency. And I committed myself to actually implement the measures that they would agree. And that's what happened. I mean, that's one of those ways in which you can actually involve the citizens. So, I mean, the 100 people actually came up with some recommendations, and now we are in the process of implementing them. So we give the voice to the people. Obviously, we also have a participatory budget where quite a lot of projects are chosen by the citizens, quite a lot of green projects are chosen by the citizens, and they do have this strong feeling of participation in the way in which our city changes. And of course, consultations of all the measures that we undertake. Now, how to involve the private sector? you have to think out of the box. That's one of the ways that we need to do it, and we have been trying to do that, and we decided to establish a green fund. We launched it this year, and this is an interesting formula whereby we allow the private sector to contribute to green projects across the city. So we create a fund. Everyone, all the entrepreneurs can chip in and choose the priority that they want to contribute to. And of course, we are the ones who are taking the concrete decisions when entrepreneurs choose that they want to support greenery in parks. We decide how to do it, but then they have this strong feeling of ownership and of involvement because they can choose the project that they want to participate in, and it's done in a way which is well organized, well advertised, and also which is in sync with our priorities. So I mean, those are the ways that we are trying to involve both the private sector and the citizens, and there is no other way around it, because if we really want to treat it as a priority, we need to create mechanisms which are going to involve all the stakeholders.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think I mentioned that earlier today, the co-production or co-creation with citizens is what we would absolutely embrace as the very first step in planning any nature-based solutions. And I know that also in Poznan, you have a very active participatory budget. So it seems that kind of similar measures to engage citizens and give them ownership of nature is very much embraced. So that's very positive. I just want to return to one of the points that was made earlier about you might have good engagement externally between citizens and the local government, but in terms of internal engagement, this issue that Antonia raised before about the difficulties working across departments and having a consistent policies regarding nature-based solutions. How do you tackle that? Maybe if I could ask you in Poznan, Mayor Jaśkowiak, is that a challenge, or is that something you're able to embrace well, these kind of silos and kind of harmonizing policy as regards nature?
Of course. First, if we see how quick all the things change, it is one thing. The second is what Rafał Trzaskowski told us. We have here two generations: younger people. They have completely different meanings. They are able to change some behaviors. They are very open to use public transport, to use bicycles. They see it better, and this is the one thing. And then we have older people, and not always they have the same meaning. And the problem is we have not enough young people in city council. We don't have enough young people in parliament. So this is also the problem, because the people in my age, they have a little bit different mentality. And the second problem, it is, if you see some reports, or if you see some comments on Facebook or in internet, it is the one sector. And then you have also experts. And the problem for me, and in my opinion also for young people, for media guys, it is what is the truth? Because some people are really giving some opinions, and we have too much completely different opinions. From one side, we speak about the catastrophe. On the other hand, some people say everything is fine, it's okay, and so on. And the problem, in my opinion, the biggest problem I have at the moment, it is the knowledge. Because from one side, Rafał Trzaskowski, the mayors of the city, we have access to the experts. And it is the one thing. And if you see the comments on the Facebook, or in internet, it is completely different world. This is, in my opinion, the biggest problem. And this problem causes the next problem, because when young people believe, when some people believe in some reports or in some data on Facebook, and it makes house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you raise some I suppose concerning questions as well, but it is really, from both of you, what I'm hearing is it's really important to get the right information out there, and to really, it's something that we know certainly is regarding nature-based solutions, that measuring effectiveness has been an issue. But I know that a handbook has recently, it's only come out in the last couple of months, which is very clear on how do you measure really clearly what is the impact, so that hopefully that will help to dispel these kind of any kind of questions that there is, that around the effectiveness of these approaches, and how to engage young people in this approach, I think, is really important, and how to also engage young people in seeing that there's an alternative opportunities for them to do something about this, so to get involved in enterprises and to really make a difference. And that is something I know in France, if we perhaps bring in Aurélie at this point, that ADEME, the French Environment Agency, she's really been looking at, really opportunities to involve young people in nature-based enterprises at a national scale. And I think that's possibly another way to really stimulate growth and to get more people involved in making this change firsthand. So Aurélie, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what you're doing in France and to stimulate this whole area of nature-based enterprises as a career path for young people. But why do you see this as so important?
Okay, thanks. In France, the first need that we identified is to stimulate NBA growth by developing both the public and private sector demand. NBA currently answers the demand of well-informed customers, while a lot of actors are not aware with NBS benefits, but even are not aware with climate change adaptation or biodiversity issues. It is in particular the case of the tourism sector. And to develop this demand, we identify that we need a sectorial approach to share the different issues with actors of sectors by sector, to tailor the messages and to identify specific barriers and levers. Different measures have already been scheduled in the framework of the project Artisan in this goal. For instance, training, and it's the case we have already scheduled training for young people. It's in the project, but also training for politicians, technicians of territorial community, or surprise stakeholders. Also experience sharing from experience from cities, but also from private actors. Support for mobilizing funding, improving French and European regulation. And in the project Artisan, ADEME, we also accompany 4 specific value chains, which are in particular vulnerable to climate change adaptation: agriculture and agri-food, forest, building, and tourism sectors. And our goal is to help them to identify how use NBS into their adaptation plan at the value chain scale. ADEME has also identified other key complementary measures to the action led by Artisan. We would like to create an innovative program and also integrate NBS in programs from firms and territories which are committed for the ecological transition. And another lever for us, you already mentioned it before, it's the European taxonomy. So maybe in a few words, for people who don't know the European taxonomy, it's a classification system establishing a list of environmentally sustainable economic activities concerning 6 environmental objectives, whose climate change adaptation, climate mitigation, and also the protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems. And this system will be a great number from our point of view, because it will introduce a mandatory disclosure obligation on some companies and investors, requiring them to disclose their share of taxonomy-aligned activities. So we have already measures that will be implemented in the framework of Artisan, but also supplementary measures. For these last measures, they are still under consideration, and we still have to discuss about the dedicated budget to do that. So we will have some action targeting young people, but but also other public.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting that you're taking much more of a sectorial approach. And of course, I know this morning we had sessions looking at, you mentioned tourism, there was sustainable forestry, there were so lots of different opportunities for careers and for market development. And I think a sectorial approach is really interesting. I also, I have to say, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think it's very interesting that ADEME, as the French Environment Agency, is really leading in this kind of area of stimulating market growth and stimulating the private sector involvement. And I shouldn't be surprised, because I suppose in one of our other cities in Glasgow, the planning department has really taken the lead on and they've just launched a very successful nature-based enterprise accelerator. But maybe Alice, if I could ask you at a city level, do you find it, if we could bring Alice in on this, do you find it a little bit surprising at all that it's the planning and environment agencies that are taking the lead on really stimulating the private sector and stimulating economic development around nature, and not the economic policymakers? Is that your experience, and is there anything we can do to change that, or should we be?
Right. So I think, first of all, in full disclosure, I'm an urban planner, so I could be slightly biased in what I say. So for me, it's pretty normal to see that planning departments would be leading. And I think if you think about what does a planner do in a local authority or in a city, they often create the development plan for the city, which is essentially the strategy. So they are the strategists for the city. So it's normal that they would be front and center in terms of trying to break down silos across departments, working with citizens, working with stakeholders outside of City Hall. So it's very normal that they would seek to develop strategy. I think in terms of economic development departments, they're often extremely focused, for example, on attracting foreign direct investment. And they're also very focused on existing operating budgets of the city. And they don't think outside the box in terms of, how can we leverage existing assets that we own as a city, for example, to borrow against it. That is public wealth that you have, and provide infrastructure. So I think that there's limited outside the box thinking in many economic development departments. And, in the recovery situation, we're seeing that planning departments are sort of stepping forward and being the strategist that's helping city leadership develop a pathway to a green and just recovery.
Wow. Okay. So you're certainly putting the challenge out there to start thinking outside of the box for our economic policymakers. Or I suppose it's not so much about what we really want to encourage them is to work together. We keep talking about this, breaking down the silos and getting them to work together. We're running a little bit short of time, so I'd like to start bringing in some questions from the chat at this stage. And I see actually there was, related to that discussion, but there was an interesting question on what do you think might be the best way to turn nature-based solutions into positive assets? And I think, Alice, you mentioned earlier that the built environment is seen as a positive asset that can be used to release capital, but the natural environment is too often seen as a liability. Oliver, maybe if I go to you first and see if you've got any comment on that.
Oh, I think I've got more than a comment.
I thought you might.
Solution.
Okay, excellent. Go for it.
With Alice's institution, the World Economic Forum, we're doing something very interesting, which is called an initiative called Biodiversities by 2030. What they are doing, including the executive secretary of the convention and many other really leaders in the world of urban design and planning and management, including Alice, as you know, the mayor of Quito. I was there in 2016, Habitat 3, he is there. So these people are designing the blueprint of the city of the future, the city that will change this economy, the city with a green economy. And this city has several characteristics, as you mentioned. The first one, its very texture is green. The infrastructure is green. Second, the functions, water, food, health, are provided with the help of nature. Third, the economy is green, not only in the city, but every city buys things from thousands of miles away. So those products and services are also purchased in a green way. Fifth, the whole governance is thought about. It's not just that outside of municipal borders, everything is everyone. No, there is a transition from city to metropolitan area to state to the national level and beyond. And fifth, as we heard from many of the mayors today, citizens are involved from the core. We have a government is a moderator, a facilitator of players. So this is the city we're building, and we need young people to help build this city through their own economic opportunities, be they for-profit or not-profit. We need entrepreneurs for nature.
Excellent. So let me bring in perhaps one of our entrepreneurs. If I could bring in Antonia at this point. Alice, go on. While we're bringing in Antonia, please answer. Yeah.
I was just going to mention, just as Oliver very kindly mentioned what we're doing in biodiversity, I just wanted to, tell you all about that. And I've dropped a link for you, Siobhan, in the chat, and hopefully other people will be able to access that through time. But basically, that initiative is something that we jointly set up with the government of Colombia. And Colombia, for example, is the second most biodiverse country in the world. So the president wanted to do something to protect biodiversity, but also to increase biodiversity in our cities. So we launched this initiative, Biodiverse Cities by 2030. We have set up a global commission, which is, as Oliver pointed out, it's co-chaired by Mauricio Rodas, the former mayor of Quito, who, of course, in his time hosted the major conference that resulted in the urban agenda being adopted, but also was very much focused on biodiverse cities whilst he was in office, and is now a professor in the University of Pennsylvania, focused very much on financing. So looking at, financing solutions to drive biodiversity in our cities. And I think what we have done at the forum as well is joined forces between the Biodiverse Cities community and our Net Zero Carbon Cities community and our wider Global Future Council on Cities of Tomorrow to work with the city leader of Glasgow and the city leader of Bristol to look at how we can create financing to invest, for example, in biodiversity and climate solutions and inclusive solutions in our cities as we work towards COP26 and beyond.
Excellent. Indeed. Thank you, Alice, for providing further information on that. And it is again, it keeps coming back to the same thing. It's, the cities are very much at the forefront in terms of leading this development. And within cities, of course, it's communities, young people, and Oliver specifically asked there for entrepreneurs to get engaged. There is a question, one of the first questions I see here in the chat, and maybe if we ask Antonia, we could bring all the speakers in at this stage, perhaps, because I'm not sure who's going to jump in next to some of these chat questions. But there was a question in terms of, do you think there is enough capacity and human resources to restore ecosystems and drive the nature-based economy, specifically in the natural sciences, plant community studies, plant taxonomy, etc.? Do we have the capacities? Do we have the skills? Do we have the resources and the knowledge? Antonia, maybe if you want to jump in on that from your experience, because you're very much at the forefront. Have you come across these gaps in expertise?
Yeah. I think we are lacking somehow. I mean, there was someone from the city hall was saying that there are several generations working at the same time. You see, there are several professional profiles and skills, and I think that there is a need to deliver these professionals of the future who are trained on the challenges we are facing currently. It doesn't mean that the professionals we have, that they are great, are not okay, but they should be recycled somehow. They should have a little bit a broader view on the problems, because I think we were used to work on items, and now everything is connected, and this needs some kind of training to understand whatever you do here, how it is affecting the natural capital there. So I think it's something you have to learn, and new generation are more and more, let's say, trained in this way of seeing the things, but still we need some new professionals working. Yeah, I think we are lacking somehow, but this has been more or less overcome. In Biofuel, for example, we have a project which is an Erasmus Plus, which is to train people on circular public procurement, to train public administration staff on how to implement circular procurement criteria and how to, let's say, draw and prepare the tenders, because they are not used to do it. We have another one on entrepreneurship in the circular economy, because many of the entrepreneurs, they don't have this vision. So yeah, it is a clear need, I think.
Yes, indeed. I think from a recent studies that we've undertaken as well, multidisciplinary skill sets are absolutely essential. Another thing which we didn't really touch on today, and we probably don't have the time now, it's probably take an entire discussion by itself, but is the issue of standards. And I saw that coming up, that there's the need to, because this is such a new area of nature-based solutions, I heard it in a couple of the panel discussions this morning, that we really to increase kind of consumer confidence and to increase not just consumer but business confidence in solution, that standards are potentially something that we should be thinking about. Alice, did you want to have a quick word on capacities? Because after that, we're going to have to move over to our final closing statement. Unfortunately, I think we could carry on. There's a lot of really interesting questions coming through. But Alice, if we give you the final word on capacities, perhaps?
Yeah, no problem. Just on capacity, I wanted to flag that one of the things that is constantly flagged to us from financiers is we have money, but there's a lack of bankable projects to invest in. And that's because there's a lack of capacity. So I think in terms of getting investment in nature in our cities and a net zero carbon future, and indeed an inclusive future, it's not just about ensuring we have the professionals that understand nature and understand how to get to net zero, but it's having the correct financing professionals within City Hall who can structure a project that it has the right risk profile, for example, to attract investment. And I think that's a critical thing to bear in mind. And very, very quickly, on the data front, I think that many cities say there's a lack of data, but there actually isn't. There's satellite data and there's Google Street View data. And we previously created something called Treepedia with MIT, which was leveraging Google Street View data to show the percentage of green canopy in various cities. So the number of trees, if you like, in various cities. And we're hoping to expand that through the Biodiverse Cities 2030 initiative as well. So, there's innovative ways that you can get data on the existence of nature within your city.
Absolutely. Thank you for making that very important point. And of course, I know Nadina Gala, who is leading our Smart Tech for NBS community, was involved in that with MIT, I think, in that Treepedia project. Really, really interesting. And I think it also features on the Internet of Nature podcast, which is managed by that community. But unfortunately, we're almost out of time. If we've time to, after Philippe speaks, we might go back and answer some more questions from the chat. But if not, we will have further webinars on this topic, no doubt, over the rest of the year. But right now, if I could perhaps give the final word to Philippe Tulkens from he's the acting head of unit for climate and planetary boundaries in the European Commission. And Philippe, if we could invite you, if you can, to provide the closing statement after this very interesting and wide-ranging, I think, think, discussion from our cities, from national agencies, from national ministers, and from international organisations, really. If you could bring it all together and tell us from a European Commission perspective how you see the future of the nature-based economy and nature-based solutions and nature-based enterprise within that. Over to you, Philippe.
Yes, thank you very much. I will not read out a statement in a pure EC official style. Don't worry. You have done such a dynamic leadership on this session that I don't want to really get people to sleep. So I will just pass a few messages that I heard today and that I was also finding in the white paper. So first, I want to really congratulate you for preparing this white paper. The partners of these Horizon 20 projects and the lead in Trinity College with you, with Esme Coleman as well, and Professor Mary Lee Rhodes. This is much appreciated, and we see it's really great to see that the investment that was made some years ago is now producing impactful results, and this is really what the research program of the European Commission is there for, is to help in transforming society by bringing the best science to the public and those who need to gain this knowledge in their activities. As you know, at the European level, we are supporting the implementation, we are implementing actually the Green Deal. And the Green Deal is a major change. When the President of the European Commission declares that the European Green Deal is the new growth model of the EU, this is a very powerful message and has many implications. And we know that the role of NBS in this context is huge, is big, and the biggest bottleneck, I saw also the poll there, is the level of investment, but it's also the policy framework that is evolving fast, but still not fast enough. We need to value nature even better, and we need to have the framework condition that is really conducive to a massive investment in this NBS to transform society fast, because the clock is ticking. 2050 is only a few decades away from us, and the acceleration of all the process towards climate neutrality and halting of biodiversity loss is a political decision that we need to implement as fast as we can at all levels. So also from the report, I think that the best is to invite the people to read carefully, to take the time to read and pass it on to the colleagues who need to know the white paper, and stress the regional dimension of the change. And I was really very impressed by the forward-looking approach taken in Poznan, in Warsaw. We are speaking to many of the leaders at local and regional level and national level, and they don't all have such a great knowledge of what science produced recently to guide them in the transformation that is called upon and that has been decided. So this is these are a remarkable example. I hope these will be also available on the web after this conference, and that people who need to know can go and look back at what was said, where to have the contacts, where who to call to implement the policies and develop these solutions that are now ready to be deployed, really, because we invested since a number of years in this area. So in the European Commission, actually, we are already applying some of the recommendations from the white paper. We are supporting an ecosystem of innovative projects and innovator on NBS and nature-based economy across Europe, with an EU-wide community of practice of more than 6,000 innovators, which involve and develop the nature-based skills of architects, scientists, engineers, designers, technical organizations or consultants, but also environmental NGOs and local governments. The Horizon 2020 project portfolio, working on nature-based solution, was supported by 220 million euros investment in 28 EU R&I projects, and they have had a leverage effect on investment and job creation. They have been setting the scene for nature-based enterprise to flourish and for Europe to become a frontrunner. This is not just a formula. This is the reality, and it's due to the fact that the research and innovation program was ahead of the policy agenda, and that's where it should be, and prepares actually the knowledge that then needs to be used for the transformation of society and to meet the policy goals. Coalitions are being formed around innovation and research on NBS in cities and beyond, thanks to the clustering of Horizon 2020 projects on transversal challenges such as business and governance models or key performance indicators. There are many documents that have been produced, and I will just list the EC handbook on evaluating the impact of NBS, the guide to public procurement. We heard about public procurement in this session. And of course, we can build on the white paper, and there will be other publication on NBS and economy. But publications are necessary, but not sufficient. The knowledge needs to be transferred to those who have to take decisions, implement, modify the functioning of the city on the rural area they are responsible for. And that is now the critical actually goal to do. But research never stops. And in Horizon Europe's first work program for 2021 and 2022, the calls were just published a few days ago, we further address NBS knowledge gaps to explore options to deliver transformative change in harmony with nature. So we will support the economic evaluation and financing models of NBS. This is a critical element for the transformation, these economic aspects. And so there are opportunities for the researchers to continue to deepen the knowledge and to be really in phase with the transformation that is now happening. The economics of nature-based solution will evolve very quickly in the future. It has evolved already, but we want also to accelerate this transformation of the thinking on the economics of nature-based solutions, and we try to support this the best we can. I also welcome the work on standardization, which is very important for the deployment of solutions. And I cannot, of course, overlook a reference to a very good vehicle to test NBS. I don't know if you heard about the European Horizon Europe missions, in particular the mission on adaptation to climate change. This is an activity that is announced and is very likely to be deployed at scale. And it's the opportunity to test NBS solution at a large scale in the European context. And I invite all those who are interested in the missions of Horizon Europe to have a look. Soon we will know whether these will be fully deployed, and there will be many opportunities, not only for researchers, but also for practitioners to test their solution and deploy them. So thank you very much for this event, which I found very dynamic and interesting. And I look forward to the next step in your activities, and congratulations again.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you very much for those closing words. Thank you also very much, not just for the strong endorsement of nature-based solutions, but really, I suppose, the support for nature-based solutions through all of the different projects and initiatives in Horizon 2020, of which we're one, and we can certainly testify to the impact that has had in terms of catalysing the large-scale delivery of nature-based solutions across many cities. I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about these missions. I think we saw from the polls there, we've heard from our mayors, we've heard from our policymakers that we're at the beginning of this journey. We need a lot more investment in this area, and we need leadership from the public sector in that investment, and we need measures put in place to stimulate and bring the private sector, get them more actively involved. So we're out of time, but before I conclude this session, I would just like to invite everybody again to provide your feedback on the white paper. There is an executive summary, so you don't have to read the whole thing. And the feedback process is very simple. You can just select, which recommendations you think are the most important. So if you could visit Network Nature, who are supporting us with this consultation process, and provide your feedback. I think the information is on chat. So look, I would like to wrap up by thanking our amazing panelists this afternoon. I think we've had a very open and constructive discussion. It's very much a starting point for discussion. A lot more needs to happen, a lot more actions as well as discussion, and a lot more investment. But we would like to thank our speakers for sharing their perspectives on what they're planning and the actions already underway, and for taking the time out of the really busy schedules to really join us and give us their support. And I think it's very much testament to the growing interest in the nature-based economy and nature-based enterprises that we've had such a great lineup of speakers today. So thank you again, and we invite you to stay with us, because immediately after this session there will be a number of nature-based enterprises who will be pitching their ideas. So you've heard a lot about the young innovators, and now is your opportunity to meet them. So it's goodbye from me, but I hope to see you in the next session where we meet some of these nature-based enterprises. Thank you all so much.